welcome back, everyone. Are you ready to hear some new ghost stories today? Well then, come inside and get comfortable. We're gonna start with a scary house. It's an old Victorian that looks like it's seen better days. The paint is peeling, the shutters are broken, letting in wisps of sunlight that dance with dust motes suspended in the stale air. As you move through the rooms, you can hear the floorboards creaking beneath you, groaning like an old man in pain. What secrets do they hold? What tragedies occurred here in the past? And why do you feel like you're being watched? It's just dirt and wood down here, right? If you can hear their whispers, if you have the courage to listen, maybe you'll uncover the truth. Well, what's that shape in the darkness? A human shape. You can't tell. But she never wanted to leave the city and her little cottage, so she rented it to a young couple, Sam and Clara. It seemed like a perfect fit. Housie needed some love, and they were more than happy to give it some tender care. But after a while, strange things started happening. At first, it was just a feeling, like someone was watching them. Then they started hearing whispers, soft murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The real estate agent had mentioned some needed repairs, but Daniel didn't mind. Daniel carefully pried it open and found a leather-bound journal. As he turned through the brittle pages, he realized that this was no ordinary diary. It belonged to a young girl who had lived in the house over 100 years ago. The home was spacious and filled with natural light, and she couldn't wait to make it her own. But there was one part of the house that made her uneasy, the basement. It was dank and dark, and she could never bring herself to spend much time down there. That is until she met Mr. Williams, her new neighbor. Her name was Mary, and her entries spoke of a life filled with joy and wonder, but also of sadness and fear. He was a retired historian who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. "I heard you moved in," he said with a warm smile. "Buyers." But as she worked, she couldn't help but feel like she was being watched. Then she heard it again, the whisper. This time it was clearer. "Help me," it cried out. "Find my bones." Startled, Sarah rushed to the spot where she heard the voice. But when she looked around, she saw nothing. There was nothing there but dusty boxes and cobwebs. Or was there? Her eyes fell on a loose floorboard. She knelt down and pried it up, revealing a hollow space beneath. Bitch-boom. With trembling hands, she reached inside and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. Phew. As she opened it, she saw 2 tiny bones inside. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but her hopes were dashed every time her father reminded her that she was nothing more than a possession, something to be bought and sold at his whim. He saw it as a fixer-upper, a diamond in the rough that he and Emma could polish to perfection. Daniel could sense the lingering sadness, the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to have been trapped within its walls for decades. Breeze. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for its story to be told. Suddenly, the floorboard gave way beneath Daniel's weight. He looked down into the dark hole and gasped. It was a woman's skeleton, and it was clear that she had been lying there for a very long time. With trembling hands, Daniel reached in and brushed away some of the dirt. As he did, a small piece of fabric caught his fingers. Behul. He pulled it out and unfolded it slowly. It was a handkerchief, and embroidered on it was the name Mary. Daniel's heart sank. Pige. He knew then that he had stumbled upon a dark secret, a tragedy that had been buried beneath the floorboards for over a century. But as he looked around the room, he couldn't help but feel like Mary's spirit was at peace. Maybe now her story would finally be heard, and she could finally rest in peace. But when they moved in, the reality of their situation hit them hard. The place was a disaster. The floors were sagging, and the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper. Still, they were excited to tackle the project, to turn this old house into their own personal sanctuary. Whatever is down there stirs and then it's gone. The floorboards creak again, and you wonder, are those footsteps up there, or are you just imagining things? She couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. One day, while exploring the attic, Clara found a floorboard that was loose. Curiosity got the best of her, and she pried it up. Beneath it, she discovered a small, tarnished metal box. Inside, she found a diary filled with sad, spidery handwriting. It told the story of a woman named Eliza who lived in the house a century ago. Eliza poured her heart onto the pages, writing about her hopes and dreams, but also about her fear and isolation. She felt trapped in the house, unable to break free from the suffocating walls. Let's go into the attic. Up here, shadows stretch and warp in the weak light, hiding all sorts of things up here in the dusty gloom. She, too, felt trapped, but not by the house's physical confines, but by the unseen presence that seemed to permeate its very essence. Determined to break the curse, Clara began hosting in the attic, hoping to contact Elisa and set her spirit at ease. However, the spirit had other plans. During one particularly intense séance, the floorboards beneath them began to creak ominously. Then suddenly, right before their eyes, the floorboard that Clara had removed from the attic split in two, revealing a gaping hole. Terrified, they called out for help. When the other guests arrived, they looked into the abyss and felt a sudden chill run down their spines. Together, they reached into the darkness and pulled out a stack of old photographs. The faces staring back at them were pale and haunting. One picture in particular caught their attention. It showed a woman who looked exactly like Elisa, but it wasn't her appearance that made it stand out. It was the inscription on the back. "To my beloved Elisa," it read, "May you find peace in the walls that hold our memory." It was signed by a name Clara recognized from the diary. Could this be the key to ending the haunting? Or were they about to make things worse? Cobwebs hang like gauze across the rafters. Bah! Look over there. Is that a floorboard? Why would there be a floorboard up here in the attic? In the dim light, you see shapes lurking in the darkness, just beyond your sight. You can feel their presence, though heavy and cold like a grave. The basement stretches before you, a labyrinth of shadows and secret. The floor is damp and musty, and you can hear dripping water echoing in the dark. There are boxes piled high, their contents long forgotten. Cobwebs drape over them like shrouds. Each creak and groan of the old house seems amplified down here. making the flickering shadows seem like dancing specters. And what's written on it? Pry. You squint, trying to make out the faded ink. It looks like a name. Was someone buried up here in the attic? Did they die here? Or were they simply forgotten? And what about that basement down there? The stairs are steep and narrow, and the air grows colder the deeper you descend. But what about that crawl space beneath the floorboards? Down here, the air is thick with the smell of decay, and the only light comes from the cracks in the floorboards above. Now, take a deep breath. Relax and let yourself enjoy these ghost stories, because it's time to listen closely to the floorboards. They have stories to tell. Story 1. The Whispers Beneath. B. House had been in her family for generations, passed down from her grandmother to her mother, and now to her. It's just an old house settling, Sam would say, trying to reassure Clara, who was growing increasingly uneasy. As Clara read on, she felt a connection to this woman from the past. Story 2. The Forgotten Floor. Daniel and his wife Emma had finally saved enough money to buy their dream home. It was an old house, but it had character. As they began ripping up floorboards, they discovered something unexpected underneath one of them, a small wooden box. But Mary was not the only one suffering in the house. Story 3. The Basement Guest. Sarah had just moved into a beautiful old house in a quiet neighborhood. One day, Mr. Williams knocked on her door and introduced himself. Determined to put her fears aside, Sarah decided to finally clean out the basement. Shaking off her fear, Sarah began sorting through the boxes and furniture. Some things were buried beneath the floorboards, but not even death could keep them silent. Thank you for listening. Which story did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below.